Hi, my name is Donna-May Richards, and I will be discussing the importance of a health IT risk assessment and a step-by-step look at what needs to be done during an assessment. And I'll be discussing the findings, the clinic, and the recommendations that will improve um, the health IT. Uh, some important points about the importance of a risk assessment. The risk assessment will help with the compliance with HIPAA regulations and requirements. Um, HIPAA has certain regulations for health IT, and it includes three major points, which is physical safeguards, technical safeguards, and administrative safeguards. The physical safeguards basically involves improved workstation and device security. An example of that is if the workstation is in a secure place, and if the screen isn't fully protected. The technical safeguards is improved access control, which involves only authorizing certain employees to have access to medical records. For example, if someone is doing mainly financial a financial type of job for the company, there's no need for that person to have access to medical records. So uh, the organization should make sure that certain employees do not have access to medical records. Also, administrative safeguards it involves better workforce training on the organization's security policies, procedures, and new threats that might arise. Risk analysis, a very important point is that risk analysis should always be ongoing because the threats are always changing. Technology is constantly changing. So it should be an ongoing thing with the risk assessments. Mainly, they recommend once a year for risk assessment, and especially if a new EHR uh, if a new EHR is being implemented or if anything new is being implemented, a risk assessment should be done. And it's also to look at if the measures that were implemented are working so far. Access to electronic PHI should regularly be tracked to detect security incidents. Also examine if previously implemented security measures are effective, and implement new IT measures, safety measures, and also this will help with helping the organization qualify for the meaningful use, which can fund the organization so that the organization can continue on. Okay, so now I'll talk about the risk analysis audit and exactly what, sorry about that, and exactly what the exact steps involved in the risk analysis and the risk assessment. There are four major points that the Health and Human Services um, department look at when they're doing for a risk analysis for the organization, and they include what is the nature of the information involved, who is the authorized person responsible, was PHI actually acquired or viewed, and to what extent has the risk to PHI been mitigated? Now I'll go through each of the steps. First step would be looking at the valuable assets, which includes what electronic devices are you using for the ePHI, and those devices have to be examined and to see if they are up to par for the security measures. Second, identify potential consequences, which basically means to gather all the information that you would be looking at to see if everything is complying. Um, some of the information that you'll gather is how the ePHI is stored, if it's stored on a computer, laptop, or any other electronic device. Also, the information you gather is where the ePHI flows, like if it's going to only the physician, if it's going to the patient as well, if it's going between different practices, and also um, how the EPHI flows. It's where it flows, like if it goes to the physician and how it flows, if it's going by email, fax, or shared network. And all of these information can be gathered from reviewing past projects or, talking to the staff or the IT staff or anything like that. Basically, looking back at past projects and talking to the staff would help you gather all of this information. The third step would be to identify threats and their level. And this includes like documenting your findings on the type of threats that can be, and three major threats that can occur is through a human threat, like if through hacking, or a natural threat, like or natural or environmental threat, something might occur with the power or anything like that that might interfere with the security of the ePHI. Also, um, in step 3, you're looking at the vulnerabilities, which is like the weakness in security controls, which one of that could be like no encryption. Step 4, identify vulnerabilities and assess the likelihood. This is assess current security measures, and this is when you're gonna actually look at the physical, technical, and administrative safeguards that I mentioned before, and then you'll determine the likelihood of threats from the current measures for these three main points, if the likelihood that the current measures will be good enough to prevent a breach. Step 5, assess risk, which involves to determine impact of possible threats, and the impact on the PHI, and document all potential impacts and determine risk levels during this step. The next step is to create a risk management plan, which is very important. And this will include, once all the information is gathered and everything is evaluated, we will then make corrective actions and mitigate the risk, meaning now we'll also put in new measures that maybe the previous measures weren't good enough. So now new measures will have to be implemented. And the last step, create a strategy and recommendations. And this is very important. This is very important. The last step is very important because the recommendations is also when you would the the organization will look at the recommendations and then they'll implement new measures to prevent a breach. There is also a tool that can be used, the security risk assessment tool, which can also help organizations with the risk assessment. The security risk assessment tool is basically an independent operating system that that takes the organization through each HIPAA requirement by presenting a question about your organization's activities. And it's like a yes or no thing where this will show you if you need to take corrective action for that particular item. So it's a step by step. The tool is a step by step. It's step by step, and it will really help the organization go through the risk assessment best it can. Okay. So some of the findings from the clinic is I broke it down into the three main points. Some of the findings were physical risks that I saw for the clinic where workstations are not in a secure location and computer screens are in full view. Some of the technical risks were when all personnel log in to the network, they can gain access to ePHI even if they don't need PHI in their department. Also, there is no email security detected, no data encryption measures, and an administrative risk that I saw where employees are not well versed on the risks of PHI. Employees are not well versed on the risk of PHI, and it's compromised, and no documentation available to employees on HIPAA regulations, which is, that's very important. So some of the recommendations for my findings, um, I did a little graph here. For the physical safeguards, I recommended moving the workstation to a secure location, provide a privacy screen for all monitors that display ePHI. Some of my technical recommendations were access to ePHI should be restricted and access should only be allowed to authorized personnel. Emails should have security alert if confidential information is being sent. All ePHI should be encrypted so that if there is a breach, the PHI will still be protected. Some administrative safeguards that I recommend is employees should be trained on proper policy and procedures and how to handle new risks. Documentation on HIPAA regulations and requirements should be available to employees in the form of a standard operation procedure, which is the SOP, or some other entity. And that's all. Thank you.